So this is part 2 of the history video. I'm trying to clear up storage space on the computer, but Jane Addams in Chicago sets up the Hull House. She reaches out to people who are needy, who are displaced, who come to the city without job qualifications. And again, Chicago is mentioned again. So Boss Tweed was in New York City. Jane Addams and the Jungle took place in Chicago, 2 major cities. It's kind of funny. Chicago is called the second city, and people used to, it's because it used to be the second biggest city in the country. New York City is the biggest. Chicago was second. Los Angeles was third. Well, today, Los Angeles is the second biggest city. But Chicago has another nickname called the Windy City. And there's a debate as to why it's called the Windy City. Is it because of the wind coming off the Great Lakes, or is it because of the windiness of the politicians, the long-windedness? Just saying. Okay, let's talk about Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt. He was a hero of Battle of San Juan Hill in Santiago Harbor, right above the harbor. The Rough Riders, former Secretary of the Navy. So he becomes president after McKinley is assassinated because he's McKinley's vice president. He has a teddy bear named after him. He loves being president. A lot of presidents did not enjoy being president. But he loved being president. He went to Harvard, so a local school around here. His family's from New York, by the way. And also, he wrote a lot. I've read one of his autobiographies. Really easy to read, a good guy, outdoorsman, hunter. I just love this guy. He's one of my favorite presidents, actually, because he's a go-getter. He doesn't talk politics. He speaks common English. He had a program called the Square Deal. How do you picture that? You make a square, and you put a guy with those wire frame glasses in it with a mustache, and that'll help you imagine what the Square Deal, how to remember it. He wanted to give everyone a square deal, which means like a fair deal. He wanted to limit big business, because he knows big business can like monopolize our lives, and we have no say. Like the Walmarts of the world take over, and they can charge whatever, because you know why? They put out the smaller businesses in town, and so when we want to go shopping, we have no other place to buy stuff except for Walmart. And so that's a problem with big businesses and not competition. Competition lowers prices. Check out gas prices right now. They're coming down for a couple of reasons, but one is competition. Now, the other thing is he was called the trust buster. He broke up large trusts. Remember, trusts are like agreements between various sectors in society to try to limit competition. So he limited that. Trust buster, that was his nickname. He didn't like big businesses dominating our lives. He loved competition. He wanted to improve working conditions and safety in the workplace. And so, see, this is how government can help out. Government can give us better conditions. Question is, how far do they go? And somehow we have to rein that in. He wanted the workers to have better working conditions. And these days you had people working in mines, you had railroads, you had oil, you had big companies, steel, you had like Carnegie Steel, big companies who threatened to take over and corner the market. One of the most famous things he did when he was president was pass the Pure Food and Drug Act. And that's as a result of The Jungle. When people read The Jungle, the Muckraker book, people said, what? That's going on where our food is being made? And there's a funny page, by the way, about how sausage is made, and it's kind of weird. They just shot it across the room right into these plastic wraps. These, how sausage comes in links. It was kind of funny if you read that. But Pure Food and Drug Act. So like I said earlier, when you pick up any food, you can read the ingredients on the back in the order that they're in the product. So we can thank Roosevelt and that kind of thinking for this. He loved the outdoors, so he tried to protect national parks. Roosevelt, like I said, was an outdoorsman. Now, what happens is in 1912, Taft wants to run for president, but so does Roosevelt, and they're both Republicans. Roosevelt had gone on a hunting trip, and he came back and he said, "I'm fit as a fiddle. I want to run for president, and I feel as fit as a bull moose." So that's what he called himself. His party was the Bull Moose Party. It was um, it was a different kind of party than the conservative Taft Republicans were. It was a new progressive type of party, more in tune with the progressive movement. And the point I want you guys to get is the Bull Moose Party and against Taft's, they're both Republicans again. When you have two people running for the same political party, or you have a third party that hops in and takes votes from one of the main parties, you're almost guaranteed to lose the election. All right, if you ever have two people going for one office, it tends to weaken like the loyalty, and so the other candidate will win. And sure enough, that's what happened here. The Republican Party, when the election was held, you had Taft for Republicans, Teddy Roosevelt for the Bull Moose Party, who was really Republican, and then you had Wilson as a Democrat. Well, Republicans couldn't make up their minds, so neither one of these guys, Taft or Roosevelt, got enough votes to defeat Wilson. So Wilson becomes the next president. It's the old third party principle. A lot of times people think that they can have a third party. Right now we have Republicans and Democrats, right? But a lot of people think, well, you can't start a third party because if you do, it's going to weaken one of the main parties. And generally speaking, that happens every time. When a person comes in and tries to run for president as a third party candidate and he's very popular, let's say Bernie Sanders right now, he could run as a socialist or whatever. So you could have Joe Biden as a Democrat, Trump as a Republican, but then you get Bernie Sanders as a socialist. Well, the problem is a lot of Democrats are going to vote for Bernie because they like him. So neither Bernie or Biden will win enough to overwhelm Trump. That's what happens. So long story short, Wilson becomes president. And just so you know, what's interesting is as Roosevelt was campaigning, a man tried to assassinate him. He shot at Roosevelt. Someone deflected the pistol as he was shooting. And Roosevelt had a speech. It was like 50 pieces of paper in his eyeglass holder, somewhere near his midsection, in his chest, in his pocket. And the bullet actually was slowed down as it went through the 50 pages and through the eyeglass compartment. That's crazy. And Roosevelt gave that speech with a bullet in his chest. Was that guy tough or was that guy tough? But he stopped campaigning after that. So Wilson becomes president. The last thing I want to say is that 1913, think of bad luck. I don't believe in luck, but let's just think about 1913 was a bad year. Why? Because 1913, all of a sudden you had okay, I got to go back. Up to 1913, American government, how did we run our government? We made money on import taxes. Things that people trade from other countries, they paid a little extra money in what's called an import tariff or an import tax. And that money paid our government, employees, and everything else. The problem is, though, that was kind of fizzling out. We didn't make enough money. And so we had to figure another way to get money to run our government. If you had gone to Washington, D.C. with me, and who knows, maybe we can later on, you go down to Washington, D.C. and you look at all the buildings, it's like huge, just government everywhere. Well, we have to pay people to work there and pay for those buildings to be maintained. How do you make that money? Well, import tariffs weren't enough. So what we ended up doing was Wilson proposed an income tax. Originally, it was very small, like even during the Civil War, by the way, we had a temporary income tax, but generally it was based on how much you made. The more you made, the higher percentage you paid in taxes. So that's called a graduated income tax scale. So people who didn't make much money didn't have to pay much in taxes. The more you made, the higher percentage you pay. So that's where we started the income tax. Up to 1913, we did not have a consistent income tax in our country. You made $500 at work, you kept $500. Today, as I've said before, you're paying so much in taxes. There's dozens and dozens of taxes that our money goes to. So you got to remember that 1913, big year, the income tax basically takes place. And the other thing is, what amendment was that? You might remember, it was 16th Amendment, where we could have an income tax. And the other thing was the Federal Reserve System was set up, and that's where you and I, our banks now belong to the Federal Reserve System. No matter what bank you have, it's a member of the Federal Reserve Board. And just, it's not huge, but there are like 12 branches around the country, and like Boston would be the local one, and our banks tap into the Federal Reserve Board bank in Boston. That's a 30,000 foot flyover for that topic right now. So 1913 was a big year for our country. Income tax started, and yeah, but we have to get money. We have to have money to operate. Finally, we're going to talk about the early 1900s. The 19th Amendment passed, and that allowed women the right to vote. We'll talk about that during the 1920s. So I'm going to read from the Jungle on Friday, so I don't go too long here. All right. So Friday, again, we have the quiz on what I just went over today. You have questions 1 through 15 on page 397. And start thinking about the muckraking paper that I want you to pass in on next Friday, okay? If you have questions, let me know. Talk it over with your parents. They might have some ideas, okay? You are the muckraker, okay? We'll see you. Bye.